All right. So it is, by my clock here, we are at 12:02. Welcome everyone to our Behavioral Health Summit Series number 4. I'm Colleen Nestor. I'm a social worker by training, and I work here at the Health Department and our Bureau of Behavioral Health. I supervise youth and family support programs. I'm excited to welcome everyone today for the 4th event in a series. We are partnering, the Health Department and Aetna have partnered with our community to provide these community-facing conversations. And so we're excited to have you all join us today on this lunchtime hour. Hopefully you are all making yourselves comfortable with something to eat or snack and drink while you're joining us today for this little lunch and learn session. I'm going to go over a few quick housekeeping notes to get everyone oriented, and then I'm going to turn it over for our fantastic panel. I do want to make a note that this event is being recorded, and the archived recording and resources will be available on the Local Health Improvement Coalition website after the event. So please note that as participants, you are muted upon entry and your video feed is turned off, but we don't want that to prevent you from using this time together to give us comments and questions for our audience and for our panelists. So the little chat bubble on your screen is a chat feature. Please use that chat box to submit questions to us and comments during the discussion today, and we will allow some time at the end for our panelists to address those. Again, we will have this session archived for you to revisit afterwards with some resources, and we'll be using that chat feature throughout the conversation today to drop links and resources in for you. That way you have some other things to reference while our panelists are talking today. I do also want to ask if you want to just forward to the next slide, please, a quick check-in. We're all kind of juggling lots today in our world, lots happening around us. Just ask everybody to invite them to kind of notice where they're at today, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's going through their bodies today, being mindful of that, respectful of our space together as a time to come together free of judgment and a safe space to kind of process different opinions and being open-minded together as a group. I also want to remind folks of resources that are available, because these are always important, now maybe more than ever, to be able to reach out and connect when you're in need. And so certainly we have the 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week grassroots crisis hotline available to you. You may also text Maryland Crisis Connect, the Crisis Text line, or use the Maryland Crisis Connect line. As you see my check-in today, I'm feeling discombobulated after technology. So those resources are available for folks in the community, in addition to some of the great resources you're going to learn about today from our panelists. So we just invite everyone to use those resources and reach out to connect for support. I'd like to turn it over in a minute to our director to give some welcome remarks. But in case you forgot what you registered for, this is Behavioral Health Trends in Youth and some objectives for our day together. In the next hour, we're going to be discussing resources and trends specific to our young folks in Howard County. On that note, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Behavioral Health, Ro Rogers-Bonacorsi. Thank you.
Good afternoon, this is Ro. Colleen, before I get started, I noticed a chat popped in, someone asking about if this was going to be recorded.
Yes, this event is recorded, and then we will pop in the link for you, and you'll see it afterwards. You'll get a follow-up email, which we'll touch on at the end. The Local Health Improvement website has a specific page dedicated to these sessions. You can archive past sessions or the recording from today, so we will be making that available for you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm Ro Rogers-Bonacorsi, the Director of the Bureau of Behavioral Health, Howard County Health Department. So welcome all today for our Behavioral Health Summit. I wanted to thank the Health Department staff and the Aetna staff for all their hard work preparing for this event today. Also like to thank the partner agencies for participating today as moderator and panelist. Last but not least, want to thank the audience, all of you out there viewing and watching today. And this, as Colleen said, will be recorded, so others may be watching at a later date. COVID-19 pandemic is a significant stressor that is impacting all of us, but especially those with behavioral health concerns. Research shows that COVID-19 increases a person's risk of developing a psychiatric condition, as well as those with pre-existing psychiatric conditions are more likely to be diagnosed with COVID-19. We want to encourage family and friends to stay connected to behavioral health resources and supports. We want to ensure behavioral health concerns are being met in Howard County. Next up, I'd like to introduce and welcome Marcus Duckworth, Vice President, Client Management, Public Sector at Aetna.
Thanks, Ro. And on behalf of Aetna, would like to also thank the Howard County Health Department for your continued partnership. I want to also thank our panelists and all of you who are attending today. As a health company, we certainly understand the critical importance of mental health among our youth, and I look forward to an open discussion about how we can all support our young people, especially during these times. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Nicola Heldreth, Instructional Facilitator, School Counseling, Howard County Public School System.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Marcus. My apologies in advance. My video is not working today, but I am here as your moderator, and I'm very honored to be here. So as Marcus shared, I am one of the instructional facilitators of school counseling, and my background has been with high schools. I've been privileged to work with Howard County Public School System for most of my career at Howard High School as well as Marriott's Ridge. And I'd just like to note that the Office of School Counseling works alongside the Office of School Psychology as well as student support programs, and we have prioritized youth suicide prevention and youth mental health. We are very fortunate to have a close partnership with the Howard County Health Department. So without further ado, I'd like to now take an opportunity to share a little bit about our panelists. Please know that the full biographies of our panelists will appear on the PowerPoint slides. So Mr. Mark Donovan is the founder and chief clinical officer of Congruent Counseling Services, LLC, and Integrative Counseling, LLC. Mark is a licensed clinical professional counselor and a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor in Maryland. He has worked in the field of behavioral health for over 28 years. His specialty has been working with depressed or anxious substance-using teens and young adults. Ms. Lisa Pearson is the Director of Behavioral Health at Chase Brexton Healthcare, a federally qualified health center. She is a passionate clinical social worker who guides the clinical practice and vision for 3 sites in Howard, Baltimore, and Anne Arundel County. She also serves as Vice Chair for the Horizon Foundation Board of Trustees. Mr. Ottman Smith is the co-founder of Holistic Life Foundation, an organization committed to nurturing the wellness of children and adults in underserved communities. Since 2001, he has been teaching yoga and mindfulness to a diverse population, including underserved and high-risk youth. Welcome, panelists. We are here today to have a community conversation about the mental health of our youngest community members and how we can take a proactive approach to dealing with issues like anxiety and addiction. We're joined by representatives from a cross-section of our community to share their perspective, and we will also discuss important tools and resources to be aware of. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about adolescent development and the young brain. Lisa and Mark, can you please share with us what are the developmentally appropriate changes and behaviors experienced during adolescence?
Lisa, you want to go ahead?
Go for it, Mark.
Hi, again, I'm Mark. During adolescence, there's obviously a lot going on. The development of social skills is very, very important. There's a reorientation of brain structures and becoming an adult human. We know that brains don't finish developing until, well, probably never, but at least until 25-ish. So we define adolescence as sort of 13 to 18 or 19, but it really is sort of extended into the mid-20s. Most importantly, it is what's difficult is it is a time to learn who they are, to learn what's of interest to them, and to start to some degree, separate from their parents and separate from their families, while still looking for the safety and security within the family. It's a really rough time. There's a comparison of adolescence to doing a tightrope act or jumping from a swing, where you're having to let go of one, and fly through the air and grab onto another. And during that time, at any moment, you might want to go back and grab the old stick and be with your parents and get the support of your family. So it's a difficult developmental time. In fact, I think adolescence and retirement age is probably the most difficult time in our lives, when we have to redefine who we are as a person. Lisa?
Mark, that is really great. I think to add to what you shared, we also know just in current day, there's key times for the brain. And like Mark was saying, this is one of those critical moments when we talk about adolescence. And in our current day status, not only do we have that remarkable change taking place internally, but we're also reckoning with a pandemic externally. And one of the things that we want to be able to distinguish, though, is the areas of opportunity where kids are experiencing positive stress, what that does to the brain, and it's good, who's having tolerable stress and the impact on their brain, and then those who are experiencing toxic stress and what that's doing to their development. And so our job in our realm is to kind of decide where each of those, where adolescents are in that part and how that impacts their brain and their resilience. And that's what I love to really focus on and help support in this time, like Mark said, where there's so much vulnerability, is what can we do to build in that resilience for the environment in which they've been placed.
Thank you, Mark and Lisa. I love that you lifted the importance of the balance of stress and knowing that there is positive stress, and we're not going to eliminate all stress. And resilience is so key in really building protective factors and ways to grow that resiliency. So thank you very much. So to all of our panelists, how do we differentiate between changes that are related to typical adolescent development, puberty, versus deteriorating mental health?
I'll just jump in sort of briefly. This is a tough question in that there are so many things going on in adolescence that as adults we would think are negative or difficult, isolating behaviors, separating from parents' behaviors, or easily agitated. There are so many things that are sort of normal in adolescence that we are concerned about, that the edge between what's appropriate and not appropriate can be harder to see. But that being said, certainly anything that becomes negative or starts to have negative impacts in your world, one of the things we always look at is how much is that behavior affecting what's going on with them. So if, for example, if they're sleeping too much or not able to go to bed, or they're not socializing enough, they're not getting to class, then we start to see that that's impacting their world. We need them to be going to classes and doing what they need to be doing. So there's that line of where is it developmentally appropriate, although it may not always be the nicest thing, and when is it causing a problem for them? I'll stop.
Right. And also, I think what makes it complex, Mark, like you were saying, is that it's so contextual, right? Like we have kids, I know some kids who aren't going to class because they're the responsible person for watching other siblings. And so we have to be super careful about what we're describing as inappropriate or not expected versus what meets diagnostic criteria for complex or mental health issues. And that really requires us taking the time to look at the individual story of each of the adolescents and the youth that we're working with, so that we're able to not say that what you're doing is wrong because society says it's wrong, but that it's outside of the norm for what we're expecting for you as an individual. And so that really means that each of us on our teams and as clinicians really take that time to get to know the adolescents, knowing their environment, knowing the expectations, and if possible, really getting to know the adults in their lives and making them the experts so that we can recognize when things are contextually different. And now we're moving into an area that requires a different level of attention.
And I know at Holistic Life Foundation, when we first started, we used to see some of the problems that we saw in our kids as behavioral issues. But we found out later that a lot of them were trauma issues, where if they experience a lot of trauma, that executive function isn't working properly, and they're not able to sit down and learn, or they aren't as organized, and it's a lot of other things that people may see that these kids are doing that they may associate with, deteriorating mental health or behavioral issues when it's really just a trauma playing out in their body and their mind.
Thank you so much, all of you. Many parents and caregivers may worry about alcohol and drug use in their children. Mark, how can we recognize risk factors for substance use in teens?
Again, I think some of that can be difficult because some of the behaviors we see in substance abusing teens are similar to an appropriate teen who's working through issues. But obviously, some of the easiest things are certainly seeing substances. Increased hiding behavior, withdrawing from parents often, more argumentative and secretive about who they're talking with and where they're going, possibly staying out later. There's lots and lots of influences. And I want to be careful to say that sometimes what you're seeing may or may not be substance use. And even if you, not that I think it's okay, but you do get kids who might use a substance once or twice, and then you catch them, and maybe that's it. And so after that, some of these behaviors may not be behaviors that you think are substance using. I want you to be cautious to sort of not over accuse or over worry about it, because this could be some normal development. It could be depression. It could be anxiety. It could be substance use. So one of the best indicators of substance use is simply change, seeing things that change for the negative. Of course, that's also a very good indicator for depression or anxiety. So again, I want to be careful to tease those out. And by the way, we know that a lot of kids who struggle with maybe social anxiety or depression may use a substance in relation to that. So sometimes it's both things. But certainly some of the big indicators, watch where their money is. Do they tend to have more money than they've had before? Do you see money going out faster than you thought and they're not going to McDonald's or something? The peers they're hanging with and what they're doing, and then how available they are to you. Eye contact with you. I know I've got kids, they're now in their 20s, but even now when they come home, I sort of want to look them in the eye and maybe go out by and smell them, and they know it. And if they start avoiding that kind of thing, again, that might be a concern.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you sharing the risk factors as well as other things to keep an eye on for. So Lisa, or I'm sorry, this is going to be for all of the panelists. What have you seen as an impact of COVID-19 on youth mental health? It's a big question.
It's a great question. One of the things that I've seen are adolescents verbalizing their concern, and not only their concern for what's happening globally, but more of a concern about what's happening to their friends, to their parents, to their immediate sphere, that I think is heightened from what I recognized before, where it really was, I'm in therapy, I want to talk about me, I want to focus on me. I'm seeing adolescents kind of broadening this sphere and using those adult skills that Mark was talking about and broadening their area of concern and really wondering where is their area of influence, what can they change, what can't they change. And for those that have less resources, it's really important for me to highlight to them their strengths, as well as recognizing the lack of resources and being able to put that ownership in the right place. Because oftentimes, even at the adolescence period, those kids have talked about, well, maybe I need to work more hours, or to be able to support and fill in the gap for what they see as a vulnerability in their household. So there's so many pieces moving, and they're working hard. They're definitely trying to do their best to sustain in this really unpredictable time.
I know one project that I'm really excited about. We're doing a joint venture with a pediatrician, where we are going to help his clients out. Some of the things that he's been noticing is that the kids are feeling really isolated by not being able to go to school. Separation anxiety. They aren't really getting the exercise that they are used to in gym class. The amount of weight gain is immense. And then they also deal with just regular old depression and anxiety. And ways that we plan to, I guess, combat all of those negative effects is by one, teaching yoga, to kind of make sure their body is physically fit. Some breathing practices, which helps still their mind and helps them get more grounded and present. And then meditations, where it kind of help them develop inner peace within themselves, even if their outward world is chaotic, while also giving them food baskets, and partnering up with a culinary school, teaching them how to make healthy meals. But yeah, during COVID-19, that's the things that we've seen increase is isolation, depression, anxiety, and weight gain.
Thank you very much. Mark, would you like to add anything?
No, I just want to bounce off what Atman said, is that the isolation is tough for the kids, not getting out, not moving, not seeing their peers. Again, I think adolescent, one of the major challenges for them is recreating their social identity and meeting people and learning how to meet people. And that's really hard to do over Zoom or some other platform. It's just hard for them to connect. So activities like getting them out is really, really important. I support that.
Great, thank you. Lisa, this question's for you. What is the impact of COVID-19 on family mental health with more financially under-resourced populations?
It's definitely one of the things that we're seeing is, like I mentioned before, that the adolescents themselves are taking on that burden, but also noticing the connection, because the kids who have more resilience have that connection with at least one adult in their life. And perhaps it's their parents, a next generation, a grandparent, an auntie, perhaps it isn't someone who's related, but we're seeing an increased sense of responsibility to try to make up for resources, where folks have lost jobs, folks have lost family members. In situations that were already challenging, COVID has made it even more challenging. And I appreciate what Ottman said about the food baskets, like just meeting basic needs are super important before we can even talk about anything else. Like, if your number one concern is that as an adolescent, because perhaps you've been ear hustling on adult conversations, that the rent isn't paid, that the electricity bill isn't paid, like that there isn't enough food in that, like those concerns come first before we can really talk about or do anything else. And so our connections in the community to be able to provide those basic resources for folks is essential. And it's important before we can even begin doing the work around the mental health, because those feed into the anxiety and the depression. And so as a community health center, it's important for us to also connect and be with the community to help meet those basic needs and resources, and ensuring that the adolescent doesn't hold that responsibility amongst themselves, but that what's theirs is theirs, what Ottman said, like your body, your weight, your mind, that's the piece that's in your control. But as a community health center, some of these social factors and social determinants, society needs to step in and help make up the difference. And I think that helps support and will definitely help improve the mental health as we move forward.
That's a beautiful response. Thank you very much, Lisa. How can parents open a line of communication and start conversations with their children about mental health? Ottman, I'd like to start with you.
At HLF, the way that we kind of work with our youth, and to talk to them about mental health and that it's natural is by telling stories that we have went through or are going through in our lives to help the kids kind of relate to them, what they're going through. We first do that to create a safe space, and once you create that safe space, that container, they are more open to share with you. Um, and then we also talk to them about, some of the practices that we teach them, whether it's the breathing practices or loving kindness meditations and stuff like that, that we do when we're in those situations, to kind of get us grounded and present and back to that, present moment. Then we also have trainings for the parents where, we explain to them these same techniques, sharing from your own personal story, creating a safe space, and then we give them common verbiage to be able to use with the kids to help them, I guess, understand that it's natural, it's normal, and having teaching them also the different practices that we're teaching their kids in our programs during the day and after school, and bringing that into the household. So it's kind of more like wraparound services. So yeah, just giving the parents basic techniques, making them vulnerable, so that'll make their kids vulnerable to be able to share, and then yeah, those techniques to kind of help heal that trauma and have them being present and grounded.
Thank you, and it's so important and hard to be vulnerable, and it takes being brave and going there. So I appreciate that lift. Lisa and Mark, would you like to add anything?
I'll just add a little bit to what Ottman said. That one thing that is really important is that I think sometimes parents want to be able to sort of walk in and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And they sort of hope to get an answer. And I laugh a little bit because it's not going to happen very often. One thing I found, particularly with my own kids, the earlier you set some of these rules up, the easier they are. But we had a rule in my house that if you're in the car, there's no cell phones. You weren't allowed to be on the phone. I think my wife struggled with that more than anybody. But it just opened up free time for people to be able to talk. There was a time years ago, my daughter was 12 or 13. She was in middle school. And we spent a day in Deep Creek Lake, and we drove down there and we spent the day and we talked about things. We played games, we went swimming. And on the way back, she decided to tell me that she was being picked on in school and started to talk about it. And I really believe that had I not spent that whole day not trying to talk to her and just doing things, that I don't think I would have gotten that inside information that needed to be talked about. It just took time and exposure and being patient and not really looking for anything when you're spending time with them.
That's so true. And I think sometimes we find that our adolescents are actually more astute to their feelings. They will shoot it to you straight if you catch them at the right time. You're right, Mark. That's time when they'll shut down. But if you hit the iron when it's hot, they'll give it to you. They'll give you the truth.
Like it or not.
Like it or not, exactly. And I think we try to model for the patient, for the parents, because this mental health thing and talking about your feelings and getting grounded and knowing who you are, that's a foreign language to a lot of adults and a lot of parents. And being able to be just as sensitive as we are with the adolescents as we are with the parents, and modeling what that looks like, because it means that the parent has the bandwidth, the space, the curiosity to want to ask those questions. And that may or may not happen depending on the amount of stress that the parent themselves is actually experiencing. So, like I said before, maybe some of those conversations are taking place with other trusted adults.
Yeah, I just want to add that this is so important with young men in particular, young men and boys. The role model of men speaking out is relatively rare. And so being able to teach a dad how to maybe be a little bit more open and talk about some of his feelings, and that way their son or a stepfather or an uncle, anybody that can be a role model, but to be able to see that in another man in this day and age it's coming about, but it's still pretty tough.
Thank you all very much. And can you speak a little bit about how meditation, mindfulness, and other integrative health practices foster resilience?
Definitely. Well, working in most of our focus is in Baltimore City, where our youth live in trauma, whether it's directly experienced, secondary trauma, or intergenerational trauma. And as Dr. Bessel van der Kolk said in his book, Body Keeps the Score, that trauma gets stored in the body. Um, and what we do is we have like the physical practices of yoga to help release that trauma so they can have their body be a safe space. If their body isn't a safe space, there's no point in doing the breathing, mindfulness, and meditation. Um, Secondly, we also teach specific breathing practices in communities that deal with that directly experience trauma. Their vagus nerve isn't firing properly, and the vagus nerve is that connection with your mind and your body or your threat perception. In this specific breathing practice that is one of the foundational practices that we teach, we make the breath audible, and that audibleness kind of activates that vagus nerve, so they don't perceive everything and everyone as threats. They kind of have it kind of develops a calm awareness instead of a hypervigilance, which is safer for our kids. We don't want our kids to think that they're living in the clouds and they're living in Baltimore City. So we want them to have that calm awareness, but that hypervigilance is unhealthy. Secondly, we do guided meditations. A lot of people mess up with meditations and mindfulness, and they do more harm than good because they leave that open space in there. When you do leave open space in meditations and breathing practices, that allows for trauma to come up. But if you fill that space when you're first introducing people to the practice in the first month or so, that kind of minimizes the amount of trauma that can pop up. So, with doing the yoga to kind of release the trauma that's stored in the body and making the body a safe space, the breathing practices to kind of still the mind and to kind of heal them up on a neurological level, and then the meditation, the guided meditation, once again, to help instill that inner peace, even if the outer world is chaotic. So those are a lot of the tools that we use for our youth, and that's how meditation and the other contemplative practices help deal with that.
Tremendous. Thank you so much, Atman. I have a question for all of the panelists. Let's touch on social media and mental health. How does social media use impact youth mental health?
I'll start. I think one of the things that I've learned in this period and recognizing is that the generation, the adolescents, they are digital natives. Like there is no world that they know without it being the way it is right now. And so I have to pause and caution myself when I think, well, you can't, that's not healthy to connect with people that way. I'm coming from my experience of connecting with people. So I have to pause. And honestly, I think there is recognizing what that balance is and asking and being connected with that, with the youth for themselves, and setting that boundary and that guideline in terms of what they need individually from social media, contact and connect, physical and personal contact and connect, and what's important and what's helpful. I've seen the whole gamut. There's kids who are doing really great online and never want to go walk back into a building ever again. And then I see youth who are really struggling with that format. I have youth in individual therapy sharing with me about apps that they've seen and they're learning from that are helpful and useful around mental health. And so I think as the adults, we have to recognize that, put ourselves in a place of learning and opportunity, and allow ourselves to be exposed to this arena that they are very, very familiar with, and sit in a place of learning. And it also gives us an opportunity for adolescents to practice that skill of what does it mean to guide someone else, to be the teacher, to be the leader, and building a skill in them that's really active and can take place in therapy. but I'm sure there's much more, but that's probably been the piece that's been highlighted for me during this time of COVID.
Mark Ottman, would you like to add anything additional?
Well, I don't know. Social media is great, especially with the kids. Dealing with a lot of separation and isolation. I think that they've done, the media and other outlets have done a great job to make people aware of cyberbullying. I do think that, um, social media can try to get kids to create a false sense of who they really are to impress their friends. But I know that, one thing that we've been able to do is stay connected to our youth via social media. And Zoom has been great for us. When COVID hit, I guess, about a year ago now, we did a virtual summer camp, and it was our first time doing that. And even though we weren't able to connect with the kids in person, we were able to drop them off boxes so they could participate in excuse me, the academic hours and the different enrichment activities, and then also take part in the yoga, mindfulness, and meditation sessions that we would have. So, the kids were still able to connect with their friends and peers and, learn a lot of things that they wouldn't have learned in school. Just because, my brother and I, we went to a friend school of Baltimore, but we're from West Baltimore, like where the epicenter of where the Freddie Gray uprising happened. And we saw the disparity in the educational system. So, a lot of the things that we got exposed to have us thinking on a bigger scale or bigger scope, we try to expose our kids to. And it was interesting, and we learned a lot the first year of our virtual camp, but we were still able to keep the kids positively engaged, and having that physical workout and mental workout and get their emotions strong while also teaching them stuff. So social media, that's a sliding scale or a roller coaster. But I think that using technology to be able to connect with these kids, even though personal interaction is ideal, sometimes you have to what is it, make lemonade out of lemons.
Exactly. And I think with anything, it's moderation, right? And so there's definitely some positives and some pros, but it's all in moderation. So our last question before we move into questions from the chat, and this is for all of you panelists: what ways can we support each other during this time of uncertainty and transition? What resources are available for families?
Well, I'll jump in first. I know one resource that has been helping out a lot. Maybe 2 years ago, we piloted our program. It's called, I saw it in the chat, Bridging Academics in the Mind, or BAM, is an acronym. And that is 11 evidence-based trauma-informed, trauma-responsive practices. And it's actually animations of myself and the other two co-founders, where in school, it was more of a teacher's tool. There were 3 different phases. Phase 1 was instructional, because our whole motto is reciprocal teaching. We want to create teachers and not students. So phase 1, in the instructional phase, we taught kids how to do the practice, what the benefits were, practicality of it, and then jumping into the practice. Phase 2 was just jumping into the practice. And then phase 3, the youth would actually come up to the front of the room and lead their peers through the practice with cue cards. We did professional developments for the teachers, so they would have like a menu on when to use the different practices, whether it's beginning of the day, transitional times, before tests, end of the day. And it worked out lovely. But then when COVID hit, we knew we wanted to still be of service, and that product is great. So we kind of changed the platform to be able to fit on smartphones, tablets, and stuff like that. And we've been selling them to school districts, schools, and we're getting rave reviews just because it's kind of adjusted. Phase 1 and phase 2 is still the same, instructional and practice, but phase 3 is like a combination of the practices, whether it's a general practice where it's all 11 practices, or things to help lower your anxiety, to help you sleep, to de-stress you. So it's like a combination of those 11 practices. And, that resource has really been helping people while they have been isolated at home, so they can, whenever they feel a certain way, they can, jump into these practices.
Thank you, Atman. Lisa and Mark, would you like to add anything additional?
Sure, we have some learning tools on our website as well for folks to just view at their leisure around mental health, in particular, also being able to address some of the trauma and extra layer of challenge for our LGBTQ community as well. And so those links, I think, yeah, awesome that you've put in the chat are available for folks to view and see at any time. And we also know that there's a range in terms of our need and our response around depression and anxiety and along this continuum. I think one of the ends in terms of our connectedness, Horizon Foundation also has the Emotional Support Human campaign, which talks about giving people the language during these tough times to check in. What is it like to be and ask those key questions and being a listener for people during these times? It's so key and important in helping us all stay connected, because honestly, I think one of the things that the youth teach me is the importance of just being real. And I think that in and of itself will actually be an incredible resource in helping us reach out and take care of our whole community.
That's a hard act to follow. You guys have great stuff. I think one thing just for parents to know is probably what's really important is the idea of patience. Again, it's a frustrating time for all of us. Lisa talked a lot about the fear that's associated with what's going on in society, what's going on with family and loss of jobs and all sorts of things. And so people are a little bit more likely to be a little more upset or worried. And so patience is important. One thing I found that helps a lot with kids is giving them a choice. Simple example, when my kids were little, we all know as a dad, I want immediacy. If I say go to bed, I want you heading towards the door to go to bed. That was unreasonable. And what I learned over time was if I said, hey, guys, it's bedtime, if they didn't get up, I might say, okay, look, you can go to bed now or you go to bed in 1 minute. And it was always amazing to me that most often they went, okay, and they just got up and went to bed. I think they needed to make a choice. They needed to sort of have some control in their lives. And the simple option to give them an extra couple minutes or a minute or two was enough for them to say, I might as well go now. A couple minutes isn't going to matter. So again, patience and sort of talking interactively.
Fantastic. So this is Colleen Nestor here again. Mark, I have to chuckle because as the mother of a 9 and 11-year-old, those days still are happening, but I remember give them power. Children will seek out power. You just have to give appropriate choices and power. Do you want to wear the blue coat or the red coat? It's not a choice of a coat, it's which color coat. And I think about that kind of playing out as a parent, definitely. Thank you, everyone, for this rich discussion and really sharing, such perspective. I think as we learned, some of these questions are pretty loaded, and you all as panelists, thank you for handling them as skillfully as you did, because we know there are not like concrete right or wrong answers right now, right? It's just kind of considering the context from which our families come from. And Atman, I loved your comment earlier about trauma and thinking about behavior and its context about what our families are experiencing. It's just so very important. One comment I did want to make a note of and see if our panelists have any comments or feedback for as we move just to touch on a few things with the chat is one of our attendees noted that her sister is experiencing that her children are expressing anger by damaging things and being mean and nasty to her, and knowing that anger is part of depression, but it's a difficult behavior to manage, particularly if you're a single parent, you're working full time. Any reactions or thoughts on how that expression is coming out for families, or how that mother or that family might be able to look at this situation?
I would just say, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Anger is sort of a demonstrating of lack of ability to solve the problem another way. And so you get frustrated and you might act out. I will say that one of the good things that has come out of COVID is that there's lots of programs and clinicians available by telehealth. Insurance companies like Aetna are covering telehealth. And so if you do need help to talk through some of this with a professional, we're much more available. It's actually been pretty impressive. People are able to show up more easily. If they're running late or something, I can text them and go, hey, are we meeting? And they're like, oh my gosh, and they get on pretty quick instead of having to drive to an office. So there's some real advantages and availabilities of folks that can help you talk through that if you need the help.
Yeah, and I know with one of our programs, we had like a viral video talking about how we changed detention to meditation through our mindful moment room, or alternative to suspension room. And it's when kids are in crisis and they're dealing with that anger, they come down, and our staff that are staffing the room, they are not counselors, so all we do is mirror and actively listen, which empowers the kids. Then we ask them a series of questions like, what triggered you? What is the thing that pushed your buttons to get you to blow up? And then we also ask, well, where does it play out in your body? Do you clench your fists before you blow up? Do you tighten your jaw? Do you shift your weight? Do you play with your hair? And then, we tell them that the next time that they kind of notice, they have to be mindful of those triggers in their lives, try to remove themselves from them if they can, and then also have tools to bring them back to that present moment, which to us is usually a breathing practice or some type of guided meditation that like I said, we empower the kids by creating teachers within them, and they are able to kind of de-stress and not, like, one of the coolest things about that program is that we see, like, at the beginning of the year, the visits to our room are really, really high, but during the course of the year, our numbers dwindle down. And it's not because they're not getting triggered or getting upset or angry. They're not acting on it. They're able to respond instead of react, and
That's awesome.
get themselves back grounded and present through the practice and identifying the triggers and how it plays out in their body.
I mean, that's beautiful. You're sort of giving them an early warning signal. They're tension their fists, or they're feeling tension in their chest. So you're giving that early warning sign to say, oh boy, I better do something else. What can I do that's better? That's beautiful, man.
So it really is. To Incredible Hulk, that's what we always say. Before you Hulk out, identify and be mindful of your body so you don't have to turn into Incredible Hulk.
I'm going to take that and use it. I just love that. Lisa, before you Hulk out.
Yeah.
I also want to recognize that I think in the chat that it said that she's a single mom, and that's really, really important for us to recognize when I talked about, if a truck that's supposed to carry, 5 tons is now carrying 10 tons, that we really have to look at the resources that the mom has. And so in her own sphere, what can we do to help build her up and help give her more resources to have the bandwidth to address some of that anger. And so anger often masks itself as fear, and a lot of other feelings lie up under that, that are underneath the surface of the anger. But I also think it's really important for us to be able to address and see what supports are available to increase the bandwidth for the mom when we think about long-term strategies in terms of helping the whole family in the unit.
Very good points. Just something I want to note, and this sort of relates to and your comment. I love the Hulk out piece as well. I'm going to have to tuck that one away. Just, Mark, I think you mentioned this earlier, the physical connection between our mind and bodies, and that release that's necessary. And once you get, and that exists, even that trip you took to, the scenario you described with your daughter, how oftentimes through physical activity and just action oriented, where your brain's not working in that feeling space, but your body is doing stuff, some of it naturally flows. We did have a comment from someone in our chat that I just put the link information, a fitness class for all levels, just how important it is to make sure we're caring for our bodies physically and mentally, and how they're so interconnected. And often for kids, that energy, that need to express energy, comes out one way or another. And thinking about how important it is to make those connections for our children, to funnel it in a healthy way. And so certainly, and even for the parents to be able to tap into that for their own well-being, to be available available. So physical activity for the entire family can be an outlet that channels that energy in a positive way. So thank you for that. I did just want to pull out one other link, and I'll kind of scan the chat just to make sure I haven't missed anything. There was a comment or a request, if you will, maybe for our panelists, if they might be interested in doing something for Howard County employees to assist their parents. I will note at the end of today's recording, we will be sharing that information. Our panelists and their contact information will be shared, and certainly, I invite folks to use the resources that we share out today. And we know that these kinds of discussions often make us think about future events or other opportunities to connect and support families. So wanting to be sure that we make those available to everybody. So we'll be sharing that out. So if you find that this triggers something for you or organizing a future event, please keep in touch with us. And you can see on the screen, the LHIC email address is another way to reach out and ask questions or look for connection for future events. One other issue I'm seeing as we kind of pull to a close here, I do want to make note of one other comment that we just got in. The issues in our community, kids playing a lot of video games, going to bed very late, no patience, and being angry when parents talk to them. Kind of, I see Mark shaking your head, some of those adolescent behaviors that we typically tag. Any last thoughts on how to help families kind of manage some of these things?
One I'm going to throw out to some degree, and not fully here, but to some degree, choose your battles. When school is so odd, and then particularly in teenagers, our circadian rhythm tends to shift a little bit later anyway. And so maybe setting a bed, discuss and have a bedtime of maybe midnight as opposed to 10 o'clock, particularly if it's not a school day the next day, or if they've got a later clock time when they have to go because they're doing teleschool. Video games were always a concern of mine, and I think Lisa talked about the amount of exposure they have, but to her point, these kids were born into this more than, I didn't get a cell phone until I was almost 30. But again, being patient and sort of maybe setting some limits. Some of the things you can do, particularly with younger kids, is offer some trading, either some work around the house or some time with family. We'll buy you some extra time on the computer or some extra time of being allowed to play games. So there's ways to negotiate these things that can be effective for both you and them. But again, pick your battles. If they want to stay up till 11 and there's nothing going on tomorrow, let's be okay with that. Let's give them some control.
Thank you. So I'm noticing the time, and we're kind of coming to a close for our time today. I want to just make a note to some of the issues. I know that question, somebody made a follow-up comment about the schools and whether the schools would address some of those issues. And Nicola, just before I go over additional resources, I don't know if you want to comment on any specific pages or resources that the school system has to support families around this.
Yes, thank you so much. So we definitely always recommend that if there are any questions or concerns surrounding your student, to please reach out to your student services department, and that includes your school counselor as well as our school psychologist. And in some of our buildings, we do have a school social worker. We also have a youth mental health page. I'm actually going to pull that up right now. It's on our Howard County page. And I knew that you're going to also share that with them as well, correct, Colleen?
Yes, I actually put the link earlier in the chat thread, and I was just searching through to pull it up again. So thank you. Yeah.
Perfect. Yep. And it's geared towards mental health and wellness, and it specifically speaks to resources, tips, guidelines, where you can get help. I know that Colleen has shared throughout the meeting different places to try and find that help. Grassroots. There's also the text crisis line, the mobile crisis team. But really, I always recommend your first stop being with your school counselor, school psychologist, a pediatrician.
Great, thank you. So just on the screen here, as we come to a close, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. These links that you see here have all been placed into the chat, and you'll get information following today's panel discussion to link you to these. So that way, if you didn't have all your tabs open on the screen, you can revisit those. And finally, if we can move to the last slide here, just to let you know, we do have one more call scheduled in March, and we're planning an April event. We actually had a really good response to a prior event. So I said 5 events, but we're actually doing 6. So stay tuned for more information. I want to make note that we have a survey that we're going to be sending out in that follow-up email, and we are hoping that those of you who attended today will share your feedback and just take a quick minute to complete that survey for us to give us feedback. And we have a special treat provided by Aetna that we are raffling off a few Headspace subscriptions. So the wellness and mindfulness app Headspace that many of you may be familiar with, we have 6-month free subscriptions to the digital app Headspace for lucky individuals who complete that survey and indicate that they would be interested in entering a raffle for that. So please pay attention to that email and that survey link, because that is how we will be identifying those lucky winners. So if you can use any follow-up information, any feedback, please share it with us at the LHIC website address that you see on the screen. And oh, I'm seeing a great somebody on the raffle from a former event won the last raffle. Wonderful, Erica. I'm glad to hear. So thank you all for taking time to be with us today. Thank you to our panelists for your incredible insight and diverse perspectives. It's always great to hear from folks in the community and kind of all the angles that everyone's coming from to join together. So thank you for your time and your energy and your dedication to families, especially in this past year when so many of us have been, our lives have been kind of turned upside down. It's good to come together and share supports and resources and grounding that we're all in it together. And on that note, I hope everyone stays safe in the impending weather, whatever's coming our way. We've had quite a February with weather. So stay safe, take care, and we will really look forward to seeing you hopefully at our March event. Thanks, everyone.